Hey everybody, welcome to Go Bold. My name is Jody Atariwala, and I am coming to you today from His Majesty's Canadian ship Winnipeg, one of Canada's 12 Halifax-class surface combatant warships, and we're currently in the Eastern Pacific, so this is a very rare on-site interview, and I'm joined today by Navy Lieutenant Steve Oxley, who is kind enough to share some memories of a major naval incident that happened in the Royal Canadian Navy. Steve, how long ago? What year was that?
It was in, I believe, 2014.
2014.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about, and by the way, Steve, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, no, I'd love to be here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. The incident that we're talking about was the major fire that happened aboard HMCS Protecteur, Canada's supply ship on the Pacific coast.
Mm-hmm.
So, Steve, I'll pass it over to you. You know, if you could set the stage for me.
Yeah.
What was your position at the time? You were aboard.
Yeah,
HMC.
I was aboard HMCS Protector when that happened. I was a sub-lieutenant, so I was really just kind of junior under training. I don't think I understood everything that was going on, but I was figuring it out. And my job, I was a qualified bridge watchkeeper, so I was standing watches. I'd only had my ticket for a couple months. I was still learning. I was working towards what's called my MOP keyboard, so that I could actually be a fully qualified watchkeeper on any of the platforms within the Navy. And so really, I was during the incident. I was up on the bridge top, and all of a sudden one of my buddies who was on watch came up and started yelling at all of us because we were taking vertical sextant angles of stars and stuff like that, and just trying to learn how to use a sextant.
Right.
And he was like, "The ship's on fire," and and we were like, "Oh, come on, man! This is another exercise. We're trying to get a wreck done here." And he's like, "No, for real!" And so we all head down to the bridge, and we hear the alarms going off, and we went down below to the dispersal area where is our staging area for if we're to do a fire exercise, and it was the real thing this time.
Right.
And people were getting dressed in their bunker gear, and people were being carried out of the after house covered in soot. Really, they couldn't walk. They were just kind of being dragged back because the hospital or the medical area was in the forward house. And so at that point, it hit me. I was like, okay, this is the real thing.
The real deal.
Like this isn't an exercise anymore.
Yeah. So perhaps you could describe HMCS Protector in terms of the way the ship was designed and how it was, because I know, having spoken to you prior to this conversation, that you talk about an after house and a fore house, I believe, and so just to kind of set.
So HMCS Protector was a 172 meter AOR, so auxiliary offshore replenishment ship, where we're basically a big gas station that's
right.
on the high seas. Much larger than most of our counterpart ships in the Canadian Navy, and that's just to accommodate all the fuel that's on board. So there's massive fuel tanks that are in the bottom of it that are used to refuel other ships at sea.
Right.
It was split into two houses. So there's the forward house where you have multiple decks, which then has the bridge on the top of it where you drive from, and then the after house where there's a lot of the junior ranks and the sailors are, and the galley is, where the food is made, and most of the ship's company actually live back there. Mm-hmm. The ship was built in the late 60s, and it had been to different combat zones over in the Persian Gulf before, during the Gulf Wars, and had seen lots of different deployments through its career. So it was reaching the end of its kind of lifespan when the fire occurred.
Right. And you guys at that time, so you were sailing out of Hawaii? You were in Hawaiian waters, or?
Yeah, so we were on what's called mid-pack oiler.
Okay.
Mid-pack oiler was a kind of a deployment that Protector would go on to provide fuel to American or whatever ships are in the area off of Hawaii as they stage to go on either to Guam or to Japan, or just for exercise purposes. We were just finishing that in the pack oiler and transiting back to a spline when the fire occurred.
Okay, and so so as you mentioned, you were on the bridge, was it
Bridge
the
top.
Bridge top,
yeah.
bridge top, right?
Because it was an open air bridge on the tanker, because the bridge top, and you can go up there without taking all the rad has precautions that you have to on a normal warship nowadays. Yeah.
Right. And so so you were there, and you had your colleague come and say, "Hey, there's a fire.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, I mean, where exactly was the fire, and how severe was it? You obviously mentioned some of the colleagues that you saw coming out, but yeah, I'd love to kind of get an appreciation for that, and then, if you don't mind, walk me through how you guys on the ship fought the fire, and how help came to you.
So so to start, the fire was in the engine room.
Do we know what caused it, I guess?
There was I don't know in particular. It was one of the port TA, the turbine alternator. One of the valves, I think, exploded and then caught fire, and then it sprayed essentially a bunch of fire throughout the engine room.
Okay.
I'm not totally entirely certain how that happened. I don't have the technical explanation, but
Sure.
the ship caught on fire.
right.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah, that's all you need to know.
Yeah, if the ship's on fire, that's all that matters.
right,
Your engine room's on fire, you got to put it out.
Yeah, right.
And so yeah, the way that ships work when a fire happens, they come to what's called emergency stations. So everybody has to wake up. Everybody gets up, and they have pre-designed stations where they go to in order to prepare themselves in the best they can in order to fight the fire and put it out. Because when you're at sea, there's no fire truck that's coming to you. You got to put the fire out yourself,
Right.
or else your ship's going to burn down. You're going to have to abandon ship. So the ship is our home, and for us, putting out the fire is critical.
Right.
I was part of what's called manning pool, where it's mostly where bridge watchkeepers go, bosuns go. Not like the engineers. The engineers have a different section where they go and crew and have different potentially equipment where they can be tasked off to fight the fire.
Right.
In this case, because the fire happened in the engine room, most of those section bases were incapable of operations and being able to put fire attack teams on the fire right away.
Okay.
So the manning pool actually were the ones that were first putting people into the fire, or at least providing attack teams to a staging area, which then got sent in until other section bases which were displaced got resituated.
Interesting. Okay. And so you guys were at this point, once the fire got established, how far away were you guys from Pearl Harbor?
I think it was 300 nautical miles. It was a few
not
days
close.
out. No, we weren't very close. No.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's all on you. Like you said, there's no fire truck coming.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so and the crew of HMCS Protector was 200 some odd?
I think at the time we were about 250 to 270, and we had a bunch of Tiger cruisers on board. So there were a bunch of civilians who were there just. Sometimes the Navy will offer relatives of people to come on board and to sail back with you. So we had about, I think, 18 of them.
Wow.
As well.
Holy smokes. Boy, they've got a story to tell too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So, so let continue on, please. Like, I mean, in as much depth and detail as you can share, because, this is, fires happen on ships. It's not unusual for fires to happen on ships. Usually very small.
Yeah.
Nothing like this. This was a major engine room fire
Yes.
where all the fuel there's lots of fuel and
there's 25
combustibles.
million liters of fuel on board, so that's always on your mind when there's an out of control fire on a ship. And
Right.
when a fire is out of control on a ship, that is the most dangerous point, because you don't know if it's going to expand, get increased, hit something which is potentially explosive. There's so many unknowns and variables when a fire occurs that it's extremely dangerous, especially for ships which aren't built for battle damage like Protector was. Protector was essentially a civilian design ship, not designed to take a hit. It wasn't compartmentalized in any way. It was designed to fuel other ships,
Right.
not as a warfighting ship.
Right, right. Interesting. And so here you are, so they have the initial attack teams, right, that go in, and then, like you were saying, there were, when people were being pulled out, all sooty and black, were those guys that just happened to be were those the individuals that just happened to be in this space when that happened, or like was
the ones that are clearly ingrained in my mind are the ones who were sooty and black, who were actually like the rounds people, the technicians that were just down in the engine room and just happened to make their way out, luckily, and find their way out because they knew the space well enough to get out of there.
Right.
And then got essentially dragged dragged forward through the ship to get them out of the danger's way.
Right.
For me, I spent the first few attack team waves. I was just preparing, essentially getting dressed and waiting to get sent in. Eventually, I got sent in as a boundary. Twice for the fire, once in the boiler room and once kind of above the fire in the machinery around the machinery control room. And I remember getting dressed and going in, and they told me, "So, how much air do you have?" And I was like, it's about almost a full bottle. And like, okay, don't go on air until you really, really have to. And I thought, what's going on? Why can't I breathe? I want to go on this air. And they're like, we're out of power. There's no power on board. We're having a lot of trouble filling bottles because our bottle systems to fill for Draeger had required 240 volt power.
Right. Yeah.
So you can't replenish these bottle systems fast enough because we had some small portable ones, which were like the emergency use ones. They weren't filling up bottles fast enough. So they said, don't go on there unless you really have to. So I remember being a sub-lieutenant junior, like trudging back aft, and then all of a sudden, like, I get to the boiler room and I open the door and I'm like, whoa! I need to put my Draeger on.
Right.
Yeah, and so you put your Draeger on. It's like, now I really have to, and you get down there and it's pitch black. You can't see anything because all the doors are closed and the fire's on the other side. There's hoses streamed around everywhere, and I think I don't know what happened, but somebody had ditched a Draeger. Draeger is it's like a fire person's equipment. It's a big bottle with the air in it, and it's got a mask or a little thing that you can attach to a mask, and that helps you breathe in the fire.
Sure.
And so I was on the deck, and I picked it up, and I remember like after half an hour, 45 minutes in there, I was like, well, somebody should bring this back, and so I huffed it up 4 flights of stairs because the boiler room was really far down on the ship, and Protector's a tall ship.
Right.
And I got to the top, and I couldn't catch my breath, and I was like, this is insane! Like can't believe where I just was after I was relieved, and I get back and I was hyperventilating, and I remember my XO came up to me and was like, "You okay?" It's like, "Yeah, I think I'm okay, sir. Like, I think I'll manage." But yeah, I don't know. It was an interesting experience. It taught me a lot about life, I guess, and some of the people I worked with, the least expecting people rose to the occasion. The people you didn't think were the top performers, you didn't they were bottom third, you'd say, and then all of a sudden, and when you put them in an emergency circumstance, they're just like the top performer, and you're like, where did these people come from?
That's super cool.
And I think it's amazing how people can rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
And these sailors just really overly impressed me with their focus and their ability to react and respond to a life-threatening event, essentially, and how we came together as a team, because you really do have to come together as a ship's company in order to battle an out of control fire.
Yeah. So here you are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean fighting this fire. Describe to me, you just saying, climbing up 4 flights of stairs, that's a lot in itself. Here we are aboard Winnipeg, and there's maybe 5 total flights of stairs that you have to carry. And And just going up a few of them can get you winded, let alone with all the bunker gear and stuff that you've got.
Yeah,
on.
once you start throwing the bunker gear on, it can get a little heavy, and then if you're carrying a second dragger pack, it gets quite heavy as well.
Yeah.
And the one thing that they don't really teach you in the trainer is how confined ships are. Bunker gear takes up a lot of space, and when you're trying to go up and down ladders, there's not always the space to get up and down those ladders, and so it becomes difficult because you get caught on things, and you get stuck, and then you gotta wiggle your way out, and then the other harsh reality that you learn is the darkness, because there's always when you're training there's the fail safe, like you can turn lights on or the lights are there, but like when you're down there by yourself, it's pitch black.
Right.
And you don't know what you're walking on. You really have to know your space. And so some of the drills we do on ship is we just turn all the lights off on them. We switch all the lights off on board ship and say, find your way out of here. And I think having done those drills on board actually really taught me how to walk through a space when you can't see and you're essentially blind, and you learn to get out of a dangerous situation.
Yeah, that's seems like super critical, important training for sure. I didn't know that you guys actually do that. But
Yeah,
that's super cool because I haven't seen that. But,
I did that on Protector. Haven't done it on this ship or the previous ship, but
Right.
I know it still happens sometimes. And
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and for good reason, obviously.
Yeah.
So, I have heard stories about that fire, and some people have described the intensity of the heat, and you just described the darkness. But is there what memories do you have of the heat of just that environment? Some people are saying like boots were like melting and this and that. I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, so my experience of the heat wasn't the same as what other people had. I never got into the fire. I was what's called a boundary, so I was defending the fire from expanding through a bulkhead.
Okay.
And so for me, my experience was the aftermath and seeing what happened with the heat. Like I remember looking down because I was a boundary once after the fire as well, in just above the MCR, looking down and seeing everything melted and being told like, don't go down on that deck because if you go down, we don't know if you're going to go through it or not, right? Like the stairs were melting away. People's, as you said, boots were melting, wires hanging everywhere. But for me, I think the silence as well, the eerie sounds, because on a ship there's always the white noise, there's always a generator, there's always and you can probably hear it right now, there's an air conditioner which is on, and the fridges are loud, and there's somebody talking nearby you. But when I went down there was about 4 inches of water on the deck, and all I could hear was it just swishing back and forth with the freeboard of the ship.
Right.
And it was so bizarre because I'd never heard a ship that silent before at sea, and I think that really got me. The other thing I really remembered was the scent, and I'll never forget the scent of the fire. It was very distinct. I never really smelt it before, and it was a little sour, a little bitter. I don't know how to describe it, but it gets stuck in your nose, and you I don't know. It's hard to describe, and
I don't think anybody would know it unless they were there.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. So how long was this fire being battled for?
I think it was battled for about 11 hours, if I remember correctly. It took a long time to put out. There were some decisions that were made to put the fire out with the AFFF system, which eventually, when we made that decision, it put it out for good. The attempt, I think, was initially to try to save the ship as much as possible, or save the propulsion system. But when that became obvious, like it's not happening, they dumped a bunch of AFFF to finally put out the fire. Because when a ship's on fire, like it's not like what you would think is just a fire on a surface, right? There's grates in the engine room, and below those grates there's a bilge. And in that bilge, there's oily water sometimes. And that oily water catches fire. And so how do you put that out, right? So it's very it's difficult. There's a lot of hazards that you wouldn't see on land that you have on ship that you have to take account of.
Right.
And our engineers and marine technicians are specifically trained to deal with these sorts of situations, and I'm really glad they are.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah.
You had mentioned to me prior to us sitting down that there was also a small secondary fire that happened. If one big one wasn't enough.
Yeah. Well,
talk me through that.
So the emergency gas turbine, I believe, caught fire very briefly after somebody was affecting some repairs on it. Also, there's another flash that happened after the fire as well. That it also in the engine room. A couple days afterwards, we were trying to flash up power, and when you try to flash up power to and energize systems, you don't necessarily know where the wire runs are, because after 40 years of a ship, right, those wire runs, who knows?
Right,
I mean,
right.
maybe some engineer has it in a book somewhere, but
Sure.
so I guess they they tried to energize something which was melted, and it created a fire. A reflash within the engine room, and that had to get put out as well. Yeah.
And you mentioned that, and if I have it correct, that was in relation to, I think, one of the gentlemen that you were saying is kind of like one of those quiet guys that kind of came to the rescue.
So the emergency gas turbine or emergency generator that we were trying to fix needed a 1 ohm resistor made for it.
Okay.
And this gentleman, he was a sailor, first class, leading seaman back then.
Yeah.
He didn't speak much English, and he said when he found out it was broken and just needed a 1 ohm resistor, he's like, I know how to make that. And we're like, what? How do you know how to make that? He's like, yeah, look, take this toaster, and he took the toaster and he takes the toaster apart and like grabs the iron, and we're all watching him in the dispersal area, like, what is this guy doing? And I remember my CO or XO came by. He's like, "This is our Hail Mary solution." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's making a 1 ohm resistor out of a toaster.
Out of a toaster, right?
And I'm like, "Okay." and he goes, and you know what? He put it in. The first one didn't work so much, but then he took a dryer iron, did the exact same thing. I think the first one was like, he said, "Oh, this was a 1.1 ohm resistor." I'm like, "Okay, what's the difference between that?"
Right.
But he built a 1 ohm resistor out of the dryer iron, put it in. And it worked like magic. We started the emergency generator, and we were able to get power to certain systems and equipment that still could take power, and
Wow.
kind of saved the day in that respect.
Yeah. No
Especially
kidding.
when, like, you can imagine, right, like when you have a major fire and a blackout, which happens on top of that, you lose your fridges, you lose your air conditioning in the hot weather, you lose your freezers. You lose your ability to cook with ovens. You lose your ability to do lots of things on board that you consider normal. And so, how do you, like? And I can imagine my command team trying to figure this out. Like, how do I feed 280 people with food that's going to go bad within days?
Right.
And how do we get help to come respond to us, because we're essentially just floating out there in the middle of the Pacific.
Yeah, and now that you mention that, it makes me think about communications. How are you communicating without power?
So I think we were able to get a small emergency generator going,
Okay.
and then we used it to power communications so that we can call for help.
Right.
And then all the help came that we could imagine. There was multiple P-3 aircraft coming in. There was an Arleigh Burke that came, a Tyke that came, and then the USNS Sioux, which was the offshore tug that was able to eventually get us under tow. The first tow that happened was I forget what the name of the Arleigh Burke, but it came in and it did its tow approach on us, and it was a great tow approach, but they missed the line gun.
Okay.
And so they went around for another tow approach, another great tow approach, but it was just approaching sunset. And so when it gets dark, you can't really do it as effectively. It's a more dangerous maneuver to do tow approaches in the dark.
Sure.
So we had lined up all of our line throwing guns. They had lined up all their line throwing guns, which are the device that you shoot. It's like a regular C7 rifle, which you shoot and it throws the line over.
Right.
And I remember they shot. There's a whistle that goes off. The whistle goes off. All there was lined up, all 7 people, and bang, bang, bang. It's like a gun volley
right.
of just these line throwing guns, and we're all like dodging them. and somehow they all missed. They bounced off the hull
my
or
God.
whatever. And then I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And then it was like, it's our turn now.
Right.
And so they all got up and they all went bang, 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 bang. And so one made it across, and of like the 16 that went off, and they started hauling it in, because you haul in the gun line with the light messenger on it, which is a more thick rope.
Right.
And just as they were getting the light messenger in hand, snap, it went into the water. And I'm like, no. So we spent the night drifting again.
Right.
But then the next morning, they came in and we were able to get a line across this time. We went under tow by them for a day, but then the tow line snapped because the tension of pulling a tanker, like an Arleigh Burke, is not designed to tow a huge ship, right? They're
Right, a
designed to
supply
tow
ship,
it
right.
just far enough to get it out of danger,
Right.
and then the tugboats can take care of it, right? So
Right.
so it snapped, and I remember it just went off and hit the side of the hull, and there was a big clang, and we had to like pull the hawser back in.
Yeah.
Finally, the USNS Sioux, which was a proper tugboat, came and towed us the rest of the way. And
Right.
yeah,
Thank God for them. But you also shared with me once the first assets got on scene, like you said, there were P3s and other aircraft, but you had some stuff supplied to you, vertical replenishment.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when the Arleigh Burkes came out and the Tyke came out, they had helicopters which were able to vertical replenish us supplies.
Right.
So the first thing they put down on our deck was just pallets of Gatorade, and I guess it's you got to get your electrolytes in here, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
so everybody gets their ration of Gatorade, and we all go in, and everybody's happy, right? Because we weren't even sure if we were gonna have water.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So and the other thing that they gave us were MREs, which are the American Meal Ready to Eat, kind of the Canadian equivalent of IMPs,
Right.
individual meal packets, and those were great because you get the Liberty cookies and
Right. Yes. Right.
the classic American
Yeah.
MRE sort of stuff,
Snickers bars.
Snickers bars,
Yeah.
and yeah. So and so yeah, we would always be trading food and trying to get whatever, and yeah, it was.
What? So what was morale like on the ship at this point? Because and I should ask, did anyone get severely injured? I hope not, but I don't recall.
No, I don't think anybody was severely injured. We did have one person unrelated or maybe related. They had I think it was a heart condition or a heart attack of some sort, where they had to get evac'd by a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else was able to remain on board, and that was good. But there was, I think, a lot of tests done afterwards to make sure, and they did a test on me because of the dragger systems. I think when they were filling them, the smoke from the fire was actually getting into the air that was being filled into the dragger system, and they said it's like I smoked 10 packs of cigarettes or something like that.
Wow.
And I think that happened to a lot of people on board. So everybody had a little bit of smoke inhalation to some extent. And some people were just covered in soot head to toe, and definitely were having some struggles for sure.
Yeah, and there's no water. I'm assuming there was no running water aboard.
No, there was no fresh running water on board.
fresh,
We
right.
eventually got the salt water from the fire mains running.
Right.
And so what we did, the engineers, brilliant engineers, they rigged a hose, a fire hose, which you could use as a shower.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get clean, and
Yeah.
I was all dirty and sweaty because I'd been sleeping on the upper decks for days,
Right.
in 30 degrees, and I get in there and I put your shampoo on, and I find out that salt water and shampoo doesn't work. So, life lesson learned there.
Right.
And the other one was toilets. Because our toilet systems were incapacitated, essentially we had to use our seawater heads. So we only had one head available for the entire ship's company in the forward house, because all the other ones were in the after house, and they're out of bounds, essentially.
Right.
So,
oh my God.
and for some, I guess this was maybe punishment for something I did before, but I was moved from the after house to the forward house into a cabin, and I thought this is going to be great. I get to go into a 2-person cabin.
Yeah.
I'm hot bunking with another guy, but that's fine.
Sure.
but it was the cabin right beside the one toilet on board. And so I would wake up and there'd be 120 people in line, and it was like a jet engine every time it flushed. It was like, and then I was so happy when the hull techs designed a latrine system on board.
Oh, okay.
In order to expedite that process.
Right.
So, because that really allowed me to sleep at night, because otherwise, the one guy would go up, and then I would get in the rack, and then he would come down, wake me up, and then he'd go up, and that's kind of how we ran things. But
yeah. Wow. Wow,
Yeah.
what an experience, Steve! Unbelievable. Yeah. So you guys are getting towed back eventually. You've got food, you've got Gatorade, and now you're being towed back. Roughly, how long did it take you to get back there, and then what happened?
It took us just over a week, around a week, to get back. Okay. We were met by a big Canadian delegation that was sent there to take care of us, because essentially many people had lost all their clothes. They didn't have toothbrushes, they didn't have underwear, they didn't have anything really. So there was a support agency from the Canadian Navy that was stood up, and they issued us a bunch of stuff so that we can at least get by for the next little while.
Right.
And they put us on the Americans had a barge, which was just about going to go into renovation, but they were able to pull it out, and they gave us a bunch of racks in there to sleep on. I got a cot, which was nice. And we lived there for a month, and our job was basically to try to save the ship, because at first there's lots of confusion, lots of questions. The engineers are trying to figure out, is this savable? Can we get in there and fix the boat? And we're like, no, the engine's caught on fire, and
it's melted,
but it's smoke and everything, and there's no way. But of course, people want to see do the actual technical assessment. Is what they're saying correct? We need photos, we need evidence, we need proof, and so we spent that time getting the ship prepared. And ready and clean and tidied, so that we could figure out the ship was A, seaworthy, and B, able to be driven again, which we found out very quickly it wasn't.
Right.
But it was seaworthy; it could still float. And so then the next stage was we need to get this thing ready to tow across half the Pacific.
Right.
And so I was supporting, doing whatever I could to land. Old food that had gone bad because it had melted when the power went off on board.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we go there, just to the last portion of this, you got to tell me, because again, before we started recording, you mentioned to me that you were scrubbing.
Yeah.
So you got to tell me about that, because I find it amusing.
So you're a sub-lieutenant, so you're put into some work party with a bunch of people, and they're like, you're gonna go scrub all the soot off the side of the deck and the bulkheads, and I'm like, what?
Why are we doing this?
Why am I doing this? So you just get out there, you put your N95 mask on, you're just taking soot off the wall, and then of course, I don't know, somebody comes by and shakes some soot off something, and it's like, oh no, I gotta start all over again. And
oh my god,
yeah,
we can only laugh about this now, right? I'm sure you were laughing at the time.
At the time, I was thinking, this is crazy. Why am I doing this? But make work sometimes, right?
No,
what you do
no kidding.
You got to do something, and that was part of the solution, I guess.
What were the Americans like in terms of their support, from what your recollection is?
They were great. I was amazed at how quickly they could make it out to us, how the response, how ready they were, and their capabilities that were able to bring us back to Pearl Harbor. When we got alongside, they were completely supportive. Their staff met us, and they're mariners too. They're sailors. They understand, right? They understand the hardships, and their Navy's gone through hardships too. And so just to be able to relate to them, and they were great. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. We're all allies, so it's. And I guess those of you that are sailors, it's kind of a bond, right? So, so ultimately, HMCS Protector was towed back, right?
Yes.
Were you involved with that at all, or were you?
No. So actually, I had to go back after a month on the barge because I was getting married.
Oh, okay, cool.
So my wife was like, "You better make it back for the wedding," and I was like,
yes,
"I don't know if
dear.
I can. I'm kind of stuck here." And then I went to the boss and I was like, "Can you let me go a little bit early, please?" And he was like, "I don't know, like this stuff." But no, they were really they accommodated for me. They sent me home early,
Great.
and I was very appreciative because they took my my wedding into consideration. My wife had to do all the planning in the end, so I still owe her one to this day.
Right.
Yeah, it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, and so a Protector eventually was towed back to Esquimalt, and
Yep.
And after that was it. Like, I mean, she
Eventually
was
decommissioned,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
saw in the news that it was being, I think, torn apart in Mexico, caught on fire again.
Oh,
So,
did it?
yeah.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it's smoldering ruins. Like there was nothing, no after house or forward house. There was nothing. It was just a big hull, and
Right.
it was on fire. So it was meant to be, right? Like, yeah.
Apparently,
Yeah.
apparently, holy smokes!
Yeah, our groups were all going crazy when that happened.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
sure. So as you think back about this, and thank you, by the way, for sharing your experiences, because I know it can also, like, I mean, you lived through it. Like, I mean, we're laughing through some of this now because nobody lost their lives, thank
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
And some injuries, but everybody recovered. And
Yeah.
so I guess we can laugh about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in retrospect, but this was no laughing matter,
No.
really. And so, do you think about it periodically, or in your life? Do you think about it, and also, how do you feel when somebody like myself asks you to kind of go back memory lane and recall it?
I do think about it often. Not as often as some people think. They're like, you must think about this all the time. You must, like, how does it affect you? And
Right.
we did a lot of, after we came back, a lot of surveys and a lot to judge our mental health. And I was one of the lucky ones. My mental health appeared to be good, but they provided the stats to me, and it was shocking, actually. They said there was a lot of people who were struggling internally and psychologically, and so I think the biggest casualties were those who came out of this with PTSD,
Right.
or some form of traumatic stress.
Sure.
And so I really feel for those sailors. The Navy has provided them as much help as it can, and that's the real tragedy of this event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So here we are, as I mentioned, on HMCS Winnipeg, one of the surface combatant warships of the Royal Canadian Navy. When you share memories of this event, or just your experiences with your colleagues, like, you are now the operations officer on board this ship, so fairly high position, leading the team that basically fights the ship, right? So what do you impart to your colleagues, or what do you just share with them about lessons that you learned, whether it be personal or professional?
I think the biggest lesson I learned is don't underestimate people, right? Like, and I've gone back. I'm coming back to this now, but I think that was the biggest lesson I learned is, like, people will rise to the occasion, and it will surprise you when that happens, and you know what, you can't bank on that, but you can in some respect, right? Like there will be people who will be able to do that, and there will be other people who don't, and don't judge.
Is that a function of training, or is it partially training and partially, in your estimation, is it partially training and partially people's innate abilities, or like, what did you see came out in some of these people that?
I think it is to do with, like, everybody falls back to their basic line of training. We say that all the time. That you never rise to the occasion; you fall to your baseline of training, and I believe in that to some extent.
Sure.
But the one big aspect that the Canadian Navy that has that maybe some other navies don't is we have a plethora of experience and people from all walks of life that come here, and they bring with them different experiences from different jobs and different talents that they have, and we're normally accepting of those things, and I think that's where we really show our strength is that ability to, for example, if we're working with the Japanese Navy, I can just go to some sailor on board, almost 100% chance there's somebody who speaks Japanese here, right? Or even working with the Koreans. I remember we had 7 Koreans on board just randomly when we went into Korea, and we were able to translate and speak with them. And so like our Navy has a very special talent, and we don't you know, it's hard to put your head on what exactly that is, because it's the people around you, and you, if you know your sailors well, you'll know what those talents are, and they'll come and help in handy sometime.
You know, Steve, I can't agree with you more. You know, I've been very impressed with the people on board this ship, but also people that I've seen on Canadian Navy ships throughout the years that I've had the privilege to come aboard, and just to kind of piggyback onto what you just shared, I've always felt that there is strength in diversity, and you clearly see it on these ships. So that is heartening, and I'm glad that you shared that perspective, because I hope people hear it. You know, I had a guest once who shared that that his thoughts were that diversity was not necessarily in different backgrounds or ethnicities, but diversity of thought. And I can agree with that, but I also believe that diversity comes from the different backgrounds and ethnicities, because everyone has different you know, upbringings, different experiences, and so you know, you can have diversity of thought. Everybody has diversity of thought, but when you have people from different backgrounds that might think a different way or whatever,
Absolutely.
I think all of it helps, right?
Yeah, I had one sailor. They're transgender.
Yep.
They owned a pig, and you know what? They were one of my best NCI ops I've ever had.
Okay.
So,
No kidding.
But the problem was that there was a pig, and they were reservists, so they had to go. They didn't have a pig care plan.
Okay.
So they were unable to do a contract at a certain time because they couldn't find somebody to take care of their pig in Montreal or whatever, or Toronto or whatever it was. I don't know.
Right.
But they were an amazing sailor, right? And so you know, to me, that demonstrates that, you know, like it doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
You can be a really capable sailor.
Yeah. Right on. Well, Steve, you know, I think that's a perfect place to cap this episode. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to share your experiences with me. You know, I don't know if you actually enjoy I don't want to say enjoy. I don't know if you welcome people saying, "Hey, tell me about this story," or not, or if it's like, "Oh, I have to tell this again," or whatever.
Oh no, yeah, I don't mind sharing my story. I've actually been invited to speak to a group before, so this is the second time I've talked at an event like this, and I think, you know, it helps me in some respect, because I can bring up those memories and you know, share them with other people, and I think if you try to suppress it, it's a bad thing. So
no, I agree. I agree. I think voicing it, you know, just taking it off your shoulders in a way.
It's a bit of therapy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, you know, it was a harrowing experience. I wasn't there, but you know, I read all about it, and it's just happenstance that that you told me that you were, you know, aboard there. So I was like, man, we have to talk if you're okay with it. So I really appreciate the time, and I wish you the best of luck in your career, because I think you're one of the leaders that we need in the Navy, and you know, I hope your career spans many, many years of success.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was a pleasure of being here.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks.